Yeah, but we can get slides out of it, out of the outline, I think, more quickly, right? Yeah, but it'd be good to have a paper published before the conference, right? That's
at least a draft, you know.
Yeah.
I think the trouble is if you rush it, it's going to end up being this unilateral thing where the organizers will have written everything. And I think that what happened last time is people slowly got awareness of it and then tagged in, you know, they joined in and they had valuable contributions, but that's sort of the way you get a best outcome to not, I think we have to target it for a quality level rather than a due date.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that, I mean, just talking about the concept of the paper, like concept of edge native, I'm assuming that's been coined in other papers and discussed, but it seems like it would be, oh, there's Brandon. So I guess can hear the perspective from him.
So, you know, what happened last time, and in something as broad as calling it edge native, what you're going to find, I'm going to predict, is people will hear this is going on and they'll have little niches they want to get in this paper. So, you know, unless you can keep the title itself very narrow, it's pretty open-ended. And I think that we're going to open this up to, you know, device discovery, security, networking, what have you. And day one, not everybody's even going to be aware it's going on. So I think that this could be,
but maybe
we can get to a
sense,
draft quickly, but I think declaring anything beyond a draft quickly might be a mistake.
Well,
but maybe we can use conference to attract more people to participate. So
right, yeah, I think we can
to finish it. Just put the baselines and what we think, and say, okay, this is where we are. Now, you know, join the effort after the KubeCon, right?
Yeah, and I'm also curious because I mean, Brandon's here, so I would love to hear his perspective, but also in the draft that you all shared out, one of the goals is to be agnostic as possible, which means not talking about network specific things, security specific things. So maybe this is one that's very general and agnostic as a first white paper, and then breakout groups come up that talk about what edge native means in specific niches, like you were saying, Steve. So that could be a way to kind of phase it in a sense. Oh, you're muted, Steve.
Well, first
maybe
of all,
you can elaborate, Brad, on what
having
you meant
me
by
here
this.
today. Yeah, it's nice to meet you. We're new members of CNCF, but have been fellow travelers for a long time. Just officially joined, and we're looking to get plugged into all the different working groups that make sense for what we do. And then Chris made the intro and quickly put the meeting on the calendar. Glad I was able to hop on over here and start this initial discussion.
Okay, great. Yeah, and just understand, we're going through this transition of moving out of Kubernetes to CNCF, and this is like the very first meeting in the new place. So if we seem like we're perhaps disorganized, we are. We've been holding meetings for a long time, but you know, there's some things changing up from under us.
This one is not on anyone's calendar, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yet.
Okay, understood. Yeah, the only constant is change. But thank you for also just adding this quickly to your agenda. Didn't mean to completely take over your meeting, but it's timely that we talk about it today, because I didn't want to wait 2 weeks. I know, Stephen, you're going out on vacation. I'm going out on vacation as well. So want to at least get the convo going now, and then look to make adjustments as necessary. But I myself am new to ARNA. I've been in my current role as Director of Marketing for just about 2 months. Prior to that, I was working at the Linux Foundation for 7.5 years in the networking space. So started off with OPNFV, Open Daylight, ONAP. Those projects all came together into the LF networking umbrella. and that I was heading up marketing for the umbrella for several years. So pretty familiar with CNCF. Have participated in KubeCons and have given demos at KubeCons, and glad to now be in a position with this new role, working for Arna in the startup.
Maybe tell us what
play in
Arna
both
is, because I'm
communities.
not familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. So Arna is about 3-4 years old, and originally started off offering consulting services for the ONAP project in particular. But since that time, we've grown leaps and bounds, and we're now migrating into a product offering of Edge and 5G orchestration, lifecycle management, and closed loop automation. So building our offering in open source in LFN projects, but also projects from CNCF, including Istio, Prometheus, and others. And our product also is all about connecting and between Kubernetes clusters and conducting orchestration
Okay,
there. So,
got it.
yeah,
So-
the chance to work now in the CNCF communities is pretty cool.
So one thing that we need to address right off the top is we have a proposed title for this white paper of Edge Native, but I'm not clear that there's a universal definition of what Edge Native would mean. I can guess, because there definitely is an original definition of cloud native. I have to say that over the years, it was common in the early days that there was some debate and even talks on what was cloud native, what wasn't. It eventually settled into a definition that cloud native essentially means that an app can portably run, let's say a well-written app can run portably, in the sense that if it is well implemented, it shouldn't be able to tell where it's running, yet run everywhere the same way. So to me, if I had to guess what Edge Native means, my guess would be that it's along the same lines of cloud native, that we have some sort of abstraction fixture in place so that it is possible to provision things at Edge. And perhaps, cloud native originally talked about apps being portable, but my observation is that as this grows, there's more to this than just the applications themselves. There's a lot of collateral things. And to the extent we can make that portable as well, that would be fantastic. You might not be able to provide such guarantees, but if we could, it'd be great. And if that is our definition of what Edge Native means, I'm in favor of it. But I think that one of the first things this paper has to open with is really, what do we mean by Edge Native? Because as far as I know, there isn't a well-known definition of what that would mean. But that doesn't mean it should stop us. I mean, one of the goals of this paper might be that we'll be the first ones to go touch on this and propose our own definition of what that means. Brandon, did you have something different than that in mind for what Edge Native means to you, or a proposal, or?
Well, first of all, I think your approach is what you just said was exactly what we were thinking. There is a lack of universal definition on what Edge Native is. And when I do a little research around, I can't find anything. There's mentions of it, but there's no consistent usage, and there's no kind of foundational element like was so important with CNCF to start off with what is cloud native, to develop that definition, and then the industry adopted around it. So as our applications expanding rapidly towards the edge, we see the need to do that same approach here as well. And it seems like this would be a great group to work with to try to get that consensus and build that collaboration and do what's necessary in order to make those initial steps. Agree that further detail can come further down the road. We should do kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. But by becoming a collaborative effort with multiple parties, and now in working in this group as well, I think we have the sort of the legitimacy to broach this topic, allow for comments, feedback, and participation, but be the guiding light to define what this means. And in terms of how we define at the edge, I think it's just important to note that there are constrained resources that developers have to work with, and they might not be immediately familiar with how to do that in a cloud native way. Seems like edge native is cloud native, but with extra elements, it's like a
and then
set.
What I don't want to push my own agenda on this, but be open-minded. But what do the rest of you think about opening it up beyond applications? Because it strikes me that some things like device management really are not applications, but they're just absolutely essential. And the original cloud native definition really went the direction of application support being portable and kind of, you know, we can learn from what has gone before us. And I kind of am leaning towards the idea that we don't declare this to be application centric, but instead applications are one part of this, and we're taking on something broader here.
Infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Because that's most of the cloud CNCF projects are the infrastructure to run cloud native applications, right? But I think I mean this original Kubernetes working group started with a white paper that was never finished, and that we use as a that's where we never discussed like what edge is, and that white paper were used by different people to put their ideas, you know.
Well, to be honest,
by the edge. So this seems like a similar thing. Now we know what's edge, but like what, you know, what's edge native applications and what's edge native infrastructure, right? That's what we need to define. What people are trying to solve in that space.
I think those are two good separate white papers. Like I think keeping the scope small could be helpful. Like I like the line, Brandon, that you have. It's the last line of the first paragraph, I think, where you mentioned that edge native is a superset of cloud native application principles. And I think that's helpful to say, like, this is what you need to add to the computing paradigm you already have to make it better for the edge. Like enable air gapped environments, I would assume would be on there, disconnectedness, kind of storage solutions that are maybe less replicated because you have more constrained resources, things like that, that do involve infrastructure, but they're focusing on the application. So it's, even though the infrastructure needs to handle, even though infrastructure concerns of edge native may be less resources, maybe less storage, the application concerns around that are a separate thing still. So it might be helpful to separate it, but it also might be helpful in the brainstorm process to include both and then figure out whether or not we separate it.
I actually love that idea of maybe proposing that this is all about what's different, so we don't have to duplicate things that really are the same with cloud native. And that might be a good a more focused structure for that proposed KubeCon talk. Of maybe the title of the talk is "What's different about running at edge?" You know, because that really is the crux of the matter. It would be a boring talk if you sat there and spent half the talk talking about things that are exactly the same that people think they already know. But if you open it with the what's different thing, that sounds new and cool.
Glad you all had a chance to peek at the outline before the call here. Any other?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't. But
okay. I'm glad Kate did.
Maybe we can go quickly through it if you want.
Yeah, we can do that. I can.
I just dropped the link there.
Okay. Yeah, right now I don't think it's set up to edit, but I can change that in a minute. All right, yeah, let me just share my screen here. Please ignore the high number of tabs open. One of those days. Okay, so we drafted our abstract talking about what, in general, is the purpose of the paper, specifically around MEC Edge applications being a superset. The idea is this white paper is fairly concise, perhaps 3 to 5 pages. We want to be as agnostic as possible in order to keep that initial scope very small and to also be completely neutral. Some of the authors potential authors we've been talking to are fellow travelers we've been working with for a while, including my boss, Amar at Arna Networks. We work closely with Verizon, and there's a network operator representative ready to contribute. I think that's gives weight to the paper. And also Srini Adapale was a longtime Intel contributor. He recently left to join Aryaka as CTO. This happened like just a week ago. But he really helped pioneer a lot of things in the LF networking space around first ONAP and then increasingly MCO, cluster management orchestration project. So those are the folks we have lined up now ready to contribute. And then of course, through this group, we would look to facilitate other authors and other reviewers as well. For distribution, I wasn't sure originally if Chris was going to think this was a good fit for CNCF, but it appears that he does. So that's what I think we would lead on as sort of the lead publication engine. But within the Linux Foundation, other groups like the LF Edge community, I think would have an interest in at least visibility.
Can I ask you something right off the bat of, you're dropping at the beginning that this is focused on Mac, which I believe is largely telco centric. And, I think it constrains the audience. Are you open to taking it beyond that, or did you specifically want this to be Mac?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, we want it to be broader than that, especially as it relates to Edge and private networks and things of that sort. Also see an application. Yes, so, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, the thing I don't see here, and I think that's also Kate's domain also, is like, accessing local resources at the edge nodes and things like that. That, one of the use cases, why would you like to go to the edge? But yeah, that's the whole topic to discuss, how to cover all possible use cases, telcos and the industry and retail and things like that, with different, as you said, different superset of cloud computing, cloud native applications that run to the edge. So for telcos, networking is the key. For industry, it's maybe accessing the local networks and devices around, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And then it takes us back to our how deep have we go, and I think we start off with something that's relevant to all those use cases, and then as we go down, we get more specific as needed. But if we try to start, comparing a telco use case to a retail or smart city or something like that, it can quickly spin out from beyond maybe what we're trying to do here initially.
Just one person's opinion, but I'd suggest that, right after the title, we have a one paragraph, maybe just a couple sentence definition of what edge native means. Then maybe a section on what's the same, what's different.
Nice.
Between cloud native and edge native. That might be part of the definition itself, but I think maybe that is an expansion where we could take another paragraph to expand it. Then maybe categories of edge, of which MEC is one, but then we can outline that there's others. And then finally, we get into kind of the detail after that intro. Now, the trouble with that is this could be, if you envision this being a couple pages, the more we do that and branch off into other use cases, the bigger this has to come to cover it.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean we couldn't do several white papers. I mean, maybe we do the broad umbrella one, and then we take on a mission to have individual use case specific white papers to follow. I don't, with the goal of getting something done earlier though, maybe the broad one comes out first, and you don't wait until, you don't declare that you're going to require perfection and 100% completeness before you publish something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe this initial piece would provide the broad definition, and then also be the impetus to get more interest and involvement and more authors stepping forward.
And if you wanted to fork it into a broad one with specialized separate white papers, you seem to be, pretty knowledgeable about MEC, and one of the use cases has to go first. So you could put one out there for that as kind of a model for others to follow. And we'd end up with 2 white papers, not one, and eventually maybe 10 white papers. But
yeah, but I'd like the idea of getting this foundational piece out by KubeCon in Detroit, and charting our path from there. A little down into the outline, you can see a little bit about edge specific factors like low latency, reduced upstream bandwidth, geographic constraints. And then we could look to layer in edge native application principles, again, around sort of these constraints, again, focusing on what's different. There's different hardware at the edge, different servicing abilities, network constraint, storage, security, power, all the above relates to that specialized environment. This last section here just talks about some of the original thoughts from Amar and also from Ravi at Verizon about which principles they feel they could contribute to. Looking at this now, I think these might be more applicable to maybe the part 2, where we get more specific around use case, and Ravi would also obviously be in a good position to talk about the networking and the telecom usage.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, and that's all we had as an initial conversation starter, and hopefully it's working.
Yeah, that's
So I put a note in the chat. I have to drop in about 5 minutes. I think I'm listed as host, meaning maybe I own the meeting. So Dan, I'm going to make you host, just because I'm fearful that if I drop, the Zoom might get killed.
sounds good.
Okay, any other thoughts about the outline, Stephen, before you have to drop?
No, that's it. Other than the form, if you own this document now, I think there is a way for this group to create a document. And what we've done before is we share it with the whole membership list, at least opening up. We've never had a problem. Some other groups in Kubernetes did, where you get trolls who go and trash a document, but in theory, Google Docs lets you revert those changes. But I think that we should just leave it open for, at a minimum, comments, but probably just, unless we have a problem, just might as well open it up for outright edits and share the document with the group. You can still keep yours, but maybe we'll just start a second one, and then you can cut and paste out of this for the transition.
Yeah, that sounds good. And maybe based on what we talked about here today, we could introduce your suggestions on format, and also try to simplify and reduce the scope a bit, maybe reduce the amount of variables that people would have a ton of questions or opinions about as well. I mean, I'm all for transparency, and I've worked in open source communities for a long time. I also know that you know, you have to be prepared to handle a lot of different side conversations and ideas that come up around something like this that eventually has to funnel down into a deliverable, right?
Right. And the idea I have for having a broad document as kind of the umbrella with specialized secondary documents for use cases is one of my fears is that we might attract people with very niche applications, I don't know, gaming, for example, or machine learning, that if, you know, we need to allow those contributions, but if we do it in one open-ended document, we'll never finish the thing, and it'll get bogged down, so that if we just simply say that we're going to link to these specialized things, then they can work in parallel and independently with their own life cycles. And I think in the big picture of things, looking ahead 2 or 3 moves on the chessboard, maybe a year or 2 out, having this be open-ended for growth would be kind of my feeling on how we ought to anticipate and support those kind of specialized niche things being a part of this. You know, in other words, they can have their own document.
It'd be interesting to look at some of the principles down at the bottom. I'm curious to kind of talk through just a couple of those to see what that discussion would look like in a larger form on a document. So, for example, principles on logging is part of the edge specific concern here that we can't immediately send logs to a centralized location in the cloud. Rather, we need a way to kind of tag and only send what's necessary and aggregate locally upon acquisition of the logs. Is that kind of the principle, or what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I don't know. I have some thoughts in that common things I've seen are that the network is intermittent, so you aspire to having the log central, but they need to be cached until you get them there. And then some deployments do both, where they keep a degree of the logs local, but maybe very recent, like the last day. And just because storage is often constrained out at edge, and that you take them up to cloud. Frankly, even in regular data centers, this is often done just because the storage cost of keeping logs can be pretty enormous. I mean, that's why a lot of vendors of these logging monitoring solutions sell them as managed offerings so that they take on the nut of maintaining all of that storage. So I think this is likely to come into play at edge, maybe even more so, that the logging is going to be keep recent stuff and small amounts local, but plan on migrating it up opportunistically as you can. But I don't know, this is something we need to fill out in the white paper, but a perfectly valid topic. Logging, metrics, observability are big things. I think, Dion, that Red Hat originated project you talked about in the Slack, I think says, I read the header on that, and I believe that it is aspiring to fill a role in some of those too, but it is an important role. Anyway, I've got to drop, so I'll check back in the notes afterward or leave some indication on Slack of what I missed. So I'll catch everyone at the next meeting.
Take care.
Awesome.
Thank you, Stephen.
Brandon, I know we kind
Sorry,
of.
folks, my internet is a little bit slow, so if I appear jittery or whatnot, that's on my side. Sorry.
No worries. I know we kind of jumped into this, so I just wanted to check and see, was there kind of a flow of discussion that you wanted to go with this? Some things in particular that you wanted to bring up or share?
I think we're covering it now. Thank you for asking. And there's always a question of, when your outline or draft is good enough to share. We figured that now is as good a time as any. I like the feedback so far about defining edge native from the beginning, then focusing on what's different, then setting the stage for applicable use cases. And maybe between those two things, zero in on those edge native principles, in particular, like logging and others that are the most relevant. So yeah, I'm trying to take it all in. Also trying to understand how you all work in your group, and trying to structure something that we feel is meets a legitimate need of the industry. And it sounds like from your initial feedback here, there is a need to start doing this, and hopefully this can be a vehicle to get started.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think people are more and more having to build their applications to be portable from the cloud to the edge, and what portability means there is quite confusing. If they know their platform supports that portability, still as an application developer, what do you need to keep in mind? If they're also building that platform, what does that platform need to keep in mind? I think those are two very important things that would be nice to have a paper kind of outlining those principles. I think Steve made a good point at the beginning of like infrastructure versus application. Dehan, you kind of doubled backed on that too, of like, are we drawing a line in here? And I think that's something that should be pointed out in the beginning of the paper of, are we considering the infrastructure, or are we just talking about application best practices, and what are our assumptions about the infrastructure if we're not considering it? Would be some of my concern on scope.
Well, yeah, but I agree with what we decide later to maybe, keep this application focused, and then, openly say that we will discuss maybe infrastructure later on, right? In some other paper, because
Right.
I think the other topic can go really, really, really broad. Like, how you're gonna deploy and monitor and things like that in the edge versus in the cloud, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, for example, caching messaging, is that the application's responsibility, or is that the infrastructure's responsibility? So think, like, for example, KubeEdge, kind of modifying Kubernetes for edge scenarios where it has its own like edge core, which is it's like API server on the edge for caching communication to the API server on the cloud. Is that an application responsibility to come up with something like that, or is that infrastructure responsibility, and let the application just continue as it is?
Yeah, well, I think it can be both, right? So if you use something like KubeEdge is infrastructure for me, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's built like that, you don't have to think about it. But if you want to write what you're saying here, like, agnostic payloads that can run in KubeEdge or vanilla Kubernetes or K3S or whatever, then you need to take a look at, think about these issues on your own as an application developer, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's a good point. Yeah. I think laying that out would be helpful, being like, we're assuming that the application takes on all these responsibilities. That might likely not be the case. There might be infrastructure that comes in to make this not a requirement, but to let a edge native application act as a cloud native one. But assuming that infrastructure isn't doing the work for you, these are what your application needs to keep in mind.
Yeah. At least, like, I see that targeted our audience here are developers, but also the architects. Like, put these problems in people's minds that they need to think about these things if they're building edge native applications, right? So does their infrastructure handles that internet networking for them or not? If not, then these are the things we think they should think about it, and maybe propose some of the to look at some of the projects that are dealing with that problem, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask if you all are involved in Kubernetes on Edge Day? That
Yeah.
day 0 event at KubeCon?
Yeah, so
So,
Steve is
okay.
heavily involved in that, like runs it,
Okay.
opens it, closes it, like does the keynote and the final, and does a lot of the selection of talks for it. So he's very plugged into it, and we've talked about this working group potentially taking ownership of it and kind of helping drive that since Steve's so plugged into it.
Yeah, I was also on a program committee for all the events. I think there was 3 so far, right?
Okay, that's great. Sorry, my internet was breaking up just a little bit, but that's another thing that I was just, oh, sorry about that. I think it's internet on my side.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Or
great.
maybe not.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is just thinking ahead to the fall, if we were to debut the original paper at KubeCon as part of the main program, that could be a nice setup for further discussions inside Kubernetes on Edge Day. I haven't participated in that event in particular yet, so I don't know 100% how it's run and what you all cover, other than what I've seen, you know, as titles from prior events. But I'm just wondering if, you know, maybe this follow-on work that we're talking about might be channeled into that event and use this opportunity as an engine to get some of that work going.
Dehan, you're more plugged into it, but from my perspective, I think a goal of this paper being to both to dually, this could be the working groups session in the main KubeCon event, but then also we could have a talk that is presented at Edge Day. Both seem very reasonable to me. Yeah,
I mean, we can do different kind of things. I think. I mean, we never had like a birds of a feather sessions or some, you know, these kind of things at the Edge Day, but you know, we can ask for it definitely. So and we just got an email I think today that they started planning it for the KubeCon North America. So you know, let's think about it from the day one. How are we gonna, you know, present the group and present maybe this work that we're doing there through the regular session, or maybe those you know, some community event or something like that. Yeah, does it sound okay?
Yeah, definitely. I assumed it was a lot of the same players as were in this group and on this call, but yeah, nice to confirm that. So I didn't mean to completely hijack your meeting in case you've got other topics to get to, but from my perspective, really valuable to get this initial feedback. And maybe as a next step, Stephen talked about creating a new version of this original outline. I could do that, and I could make it shareable to the group, and I could incorporate some of the things we talked about today, can kind of eliminate things that maybe feel a little too detailed at this point, or just put a qualifier, you know, to be addressed in the future. And if I could get that shared draft back to the 3 of you for input, and then we could, then when you feel like it's at the right state, share more broadly within this group or others. I haven't shared anything yet on the mailing list or anything else, so it might be weird coming from me, but would want to, have a draft that we all feel comfortable with based on your inputs today.
Oh, so I shared in the chat the mailing list, the Google group that we are using, you know, still. And I think if you join that group and if you share out access to the paper to the whole group, that should be enough to get things going with everyone. So
yeah,
okay.
that's that's a way to have share access with somewhat limited scope, but with everyone who, and anyone can join that group too, but it does add a little bit of scoping down there.
Okay, great. Well, how about
Yeah,
I
and
take
when we
the
are ready-
action of cleaning this up a little bit, sharing it back with you, and you can help me get it posted in the right place.
Yeah, I think that all sounds great. I think it would be nice to kind of figure out timelines here. If things were to go ideally as planned, and this were to be something that could be presented in Detroit, what would the timeline be? So like what state do we want to be in by the next meeting, for example, in 2 weeks?
Yeah, unfortunately, in 2 weeks, I'll be out on vacation, but my colleague Amar could certainly attend. Yeah, maybe if we get an outline out to the mailing list or the Google group sooner, we could solicit some feedback, and then on the next call in 2 weeks, incorporate that feedback and try to finalize the scope of this original paper more firmly. And then when looking to prepare materials for events, always just work backwards from when we have to have everything all ready. I think KubeCon is mid-October, if I'm not wrong. That seems to be a good amount of time for something of this length, at least if we keep it in the high level 3 to 5 page realm. But again, this is me not knowing exactly how the community works, and I think we do need to anticipate some cycles talking it through with relevant groups.
I don't remember, but when do we need to submit our working group session? Do you know, Dehan?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you know when we need to submit our session for the working
Yeah,
group?
I don't know. I think that's what Steve said, that's changed, right? That
Yeah.
we don't have it guaranteed, and especially as we're going through the tag runtime. So maybe we should ask our liaison.
I have it pulled up. Ricardo sent me a while back. So the deadline is July 11th.
Oh, coming right up.
Wow. Yeah.
But I mean, that's to submit the proposal. That's not super binding. It's just by July 11th, we're going to want to know whether this is a feasible goal. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that can be vague too. Like it can be, the proposal could be, hey, the proposal could be what are the extra properties that take that are needed to make a cloud native application edge native? List out a few that we had outlined, talk about there's a white paper underway in the CNCF IoT Edge working group defining this. Come learn about kind of the rubric for your edge native application. Something vague like that could be probably sufficient and eye-catching enough to put in early on.
Yeah.
That
So let's start a new doc that we'll use to sketch the abstract for the session. We can work on that first, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like we have 2 new docs that are going to need to be made. One, Brandon, for a new one that's going to have the iterations that we discussed and new access rights with the IoT Edge working group, Google group that Dehan sent. Another that will be this abstract for the working group's talk that's focused on what is edge native. Does that seem about right?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Great.
So I just figured out today that I probably won't go to KubeCon. We have I don't know how they did it, but there's a EclipseCon at the same week as KubeCon, and I think we are committed yesterday to do a hackathon there with a Bluetooth mesh and everything. If that happens, I wouldn't be able to travel, but I'm willing to help with the presentation and the paper. No matter that. But another one for me to miss, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I was hoping you'd get the opportunity to do this one.
Yeah. It's just a clash of two conferences. I don't know how they planned it. I think it's a mission on the Eclipse side, but yeah.
Okay, well, we can have up to 4 speakers. So that's something we also want to, when we submit this, we need to decide what 4 speakers. I know from past hybrid KubeCons, it's kind of you're all in person or you're all hybrid. So we could choose to all be hybrid, Dan, if we wanted. There does seem to be larger audiences if we do in person, but you know, we should be flexible with these times. So that's something we can also discuss.
I mean, you know, let's see how it goes. You know, you don't have to do anything special, you know, because of me. If it's better to, if you all guys can be there in person, and that's better way, that's great. I'll be there as a as a support this time, and yeah, there'll be more KubeCons, so don't worry about it.
And it sounds like we have a lot of potential speakers, so we might even have all 4 speakers. Sometimes it's better to cut down the number, but yeah, like with those potential authors, Brandon, maybe Steve's interested. So that's something we can consider over these next couple weeks. Yeah.
But that shouldn't stop us for you know, organizing and planning right now.
Great. And great. And it looks like I didn't notice we have another person who's joined. Is it Ariane?
Hey, it's Ariane.
Ariane, awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to listen in. I just joined the Kubernetes Slack like yesterday and found this group.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you.
I didn't see when you hopped on, but just for context, we've been discussing looking at creating a white paper around what does edge native mean in the context of this background we have of cloud native, and what are the additional considerations for edge native. And Brandon proposed this and put together kind of an abstract for this. And then we were talking about how we can kind of present this discussion at KubeCons. So that's kind of what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, very cool.
Great.
So Aaron, if you want to tell us anything about what you're doing, what your interests, feel free to do it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an intern at Microsoft, and this summer my project is to evaluate the Kubernetes ecosystem and just find the most popular workloads. So I guess one way of me doing that is looking through the Kubernetes Slack, and I noticed that you guys were meeting right now, so I decided to join the meeting and see if I could figure stuff out from here. I mean, I guess this meeting wasn't super helpful for my specific goal, which is fine. I wasn't really expecting that. But yeah, I think if any of you are able to help me or just give me insights as to what's the most popular workloads running in Kubernetes around the edge, I would really appreciate that. We could talk about it later, set up a meeting or something, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that question would be a great one to put in the Slack, and people can kind of have a chat around it. I know there are common use cases for the edge, like a lot of ML pre-processing. We even, in some of our couple previous white papers, talk about some of the common edge use cases and some of the applications that go with that, I think, in our Kubernetes GitHub. So we can, maybe once you comment, I can link some of those. But that would be a great one to kind of ask the whole community that's in the Slack there, because I'm sure there's a lot of answers to that. And it sounds like ideally you'll get the answer of this is like a specific application we're running, and so you can just go run it as an example.
Definitely. What channel do you think I should post it in? Because there's like 400.
Yes, our Slack channel is under the Kubernetes Slack. It's I'll try and link it.
Is it the WG-Edge something?
Yeah.
Oh, I lost it. Okay.
Yes.
WG-IoT-Edge. Yeah, I see
okay,
you.
awesome.
You're there. Yeah.
Yeah, just trying. Cool. All right, jumped earlier. How often do y'all meet?
Every 2 weeks.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. But so I think tracking the working group is good because we are trying to bring people who are doing interesting stuff, interesting projects in this area to present to the group. So that's one way to find out what's new and hot. But I also think tracking the progress of this white paper might be super useful for you, because that's where all the thinking will be going of defining what's relevant and what's not for the Edge native app development, right?
Right.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're in our final minutes. Are there any other things that people wanted to bring up? Great. So I think on the transition to the CNCF side, just an update there. I'm reaching out and trying to get us added to the CNCF calendar. We are currently a part of the Kubernetes calendar, but it doesn't reflect our current meeting cadence. So that's kind of in flux at the moment, but hopefully we'll have a new calendar to point to, and meetings will be clearly delineated there. Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I think we can say our goodbyes. And it was great meeting you, Brandon, Aaron, and see everyone next time.
Yeah, take care, and we'll sync on Slack about the action steps, right?
Yep. Thank you, Kate. Thanks all.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.